Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to use BeerSmith 3 to make a brewing recipe that you can use on your brew day. Now, there are a lot of different options in BeerSmith, and you can really get advanced with it. But today we're going to stick to some of the basics that you have to have set up properly to get some accurate numbers on your brew day. Let's get started. First, you're going to want to name your recipe. I'm calling mine Oktoberfest because, well, we're making an Oktoberfest. And then you can put your name here if you're interested. The next thing you need to do is select the type of equipment that you're going to use. Now, I've already made a profile. I have a system called the Mash and Boil, and I can brew up to 5 gallons in the Mash and Boil. So I made a 5-gallon profile, but today I only want to make a 3.5-gallon batch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. If you ever want to edit your profiles, you can click this little button here, and then you can rename them. Change whether or not it's an all grain, a cider, a mead, a wine recipe. And you can change your brew house efficiency. I'm going to change my brew house efficiency to 60% because recently I haven't been getting the greatest efficiencies, and that's okay. As long as you know generally where you're sitting, you can change this number, and that'll help the calculations work out in your favor. Now, I know that my system has a mash tun volume of 7.5 gallons, and it weighs about 10 pounds. And then I chose 0.12 because if you look down here, it tells you if your system is stainless steel to choose 0.12. And there you go. I then left most of this blank. And then you can go up to the top here. This is information about your fermenter and bottling volumes. My goal is to have a final volume for bottling at about 3.25 gallons. So I set my batch volume to 3.5. I typically lose about a quarter of a gallon or 0.25 gallons in the fermenter. So going into the keg, I should have about 3.25 gallons. If I wanted to have a true 3.5 gallon going into the fermenter or going into bottles, I would just compensate here by typing in 7.5. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Now this is really important. It's important to know how much you're actually going to boil off during your boil. So in a 60-minute boil, which is what I'm planning on doing, I typically lose about 1 gallon per hour. And that's how this is set up here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 1. Then go ahead and click OK. Perfect. Now we're all set up. You'll see that the type has kind of been locked into all grain, and my batch size has been locked at 3.75. Now at any time, I can change this number, but that's up to you. My brew house efficiency changed as well to 60. And my boil time, 60 minutes. Now let's start adding some of the ingredients that we want to add. So if you want to add ingredients, you can click Add Fermentables. I'm going to add some Pilsner by typing in Pils and clicking here. And I'm going to add about 5 pounds of that. Then I'm going to hit Add Fermentables without closing. When I do that, it'll add it here, but leave this window open so I can add more. I want to add Munich malt. So we'll click here and let's add 4 pounds of that. I also want to add Vienna malt. And I'll click 1. And you can add as many malts as you want. You can see that there's a huge variety of malts. So you shouldn't have a problem finding the ones that you commonly use. Okay, these are the 3 that I want to use right here. Now, I also want to add some hops. My recipe calls for Hallertau hops. And you can see that there's a variety of different Hallertau hops. I'm going to use these because I know my local brew shop has them. And I want to add them in the boil at 60 minutes. 1 ounce should be fine. Let's click OK. I also like to add acid malt, just a little bit. Maybe your recipe calls for it, maybe it doesn't. There. Now we have 5 pounds of Pilsner, 4 of Munich, 1 of Vienna, 10 ounces of acid malt, and 1 ounce of Hallertau. Let's go down here and select the style. Now the style of beer is called a Marzen, also known as Oktoberfest, and I'll click on that. You see these sliders here. The sliders give you an idea whether or not you're staying within the range for that specific type of beer. It's suggesting that my estimated original gravity, based on what I added here, will be 1062. And that's a little bit outside of the range that they recommend. See, it tells you that your upper range should be 1060, but 1062 is pretty close, so I'm not worried about it. My bitterness is actually right in the center. That's great. It suggests 18 to 24 IBUs, and it's predicting that I'll have about 20.7. The color falls in the range as well. A little bit on the low end, but that's okay. It even gives you a little image up here to tell you, hey, this is what your beer might look like. That's pretty cool. Finally, it's estimating an ABV of 6%. Great. That falls pretty much right in the middle of what I'm looking to do. Here's a little pro tip. Bitterness ratio. Some of you may know what this number means, and some may not, but it will actually calculate your bitterness ratio out for you. Again, this is a little bit of an advanced trick for when you're creating your recipes. Something to think about. I would definitely check out the concept of bitterness ratio online, or talk to your homebrew shop owner about this as well. Oh, don't forget, we got to add our yeast. So let's click Add Yeast. I'm going to use S23. And I'm going to use one package. And the packaging date, I'm going to assume best case scenario as today. Clearly it wasn't packaged today, but we're going to do that just so that the program knows, hey, we're using fresh yeast. Go ahead and hit OK. Now we can go over to starter. If I wanted to make a starter, some of the information here to make a starter would be given to you. See, with one package of the S23, it's suggesting I'll have about 180 billion cells, and the program is telling me that I need about 322. So it's suggesting that I actually use 1.7 packages, or 2 if you wanted to round it. I'm probably going to just use 1 and do a pressure fermentation, so I should be able to just use 1, but we'll see what happens when we actually get to that day. Now we need to add the water. Now, I haven't told BeerSmith what type of mash I'm going to do, and depending on the type of mash that you do, whether it's a full boil or a full volume boil, or if it's a batch sparge or a fly sparge, the total amount of water that you actually need will change. So I actually like to jump ahead to the mash first before adding water. If you click here, you can change the type of mash that you're going to do. There's all kinds of different mashes. There's brew in a bag, decoction, single infusion, and you can even create your own mash profile. To keep it simple, I'm going to use a brew in a bag full body. That just means full body, that our actual mash temperature is going to be on the higher range, 156, versus like a 148 for a lower body, drier beer. So it's telling me I need to add 5.68 gallons of water at 165 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to add my grain, and that temperature should drop to about 156. And then we'll hold it for 60 minutes. Pretty standard procedure. If you really want to get a little more advanced in the pH of it, you can see that I added some acid malt. And it's predicting that my adjusted mash pH with the acid malt should be about 5.3. And that's great. That's a pretty good pH to be at for the enzymes to do their business. Okay. One thing to always remember to do is to save. If you click the OK button, it saves your profile right here. Let's open it back up. We have our mash set up for a brew in a bag full body. Now we can add our water profile. So the total volume of water is 5.68. That's how much we should go buy at the grocery store if we want to use distilled water, which is what I want to do. So all I'm going to do is tell BeerSmith that I'm going to use distilled water and then add different minerals, different salts, to get the profile that I want. So I'm going to click Add Water, and I'm going to tell it, hey, we're starting with distilled water. If you're using reverse osmosis, you're going to have the same profile here. So just go ahead and click Distilled. Now I'm going to tell BeerSmith, hey, I don't want it to just be distilled. I want to actually add some salts. You can click Choose Target Profile here, and then select a variety of different pre-selected profiles for water. If you want the water in Austria, you can click on this one. Or how about Portland? Maybe you're making a lager. Here's a lager profile. I like to use amber balanced for any beer that's between 7 and 17 SRMs. This tends to be a really good one. Or I can do an amber full. Let's just go with amber balanced. Now, these little white boxes have been pre-filled with the amber balanced profile. I don't like to add magnesium to my water, so I'm just going to go ahead and click 0. And I don't use chalk, so I'm going to hit exclude chalk. If you like to use chalk, you can go ahead and uncheck it. But for me, I don't have any on hand. I'm just going to hit exclude chalk and then click OK. Awesome. It tells you all the different salts that you need and when to use them, which in my case will all be in the mash. Now, I don't want to use this here, this Epsom salt. So I'm just going to go ahead and click it and click delete. It also says to add 0.18 grams of sodium chloride. I could use that if I want, but to be honest, I'm just going to click delete. It didn't really change my profile too much here. And you see that it gives you the different cations and anions here, and they have these little blue dots. When it's a blue dot, it means it's within the range that it's representing here. My magnesium is at 0, but that's okay. That's just a personal choice. Hit OK to save, and then click back in. Again, never hurts to save. So we have our design set up, we have our water set up, and we have our mash set up. You can go ahead and then follow the directions here during mash day and use this tab here to set a timer. You can click run and it'll actually start counting. And there'll be a little bell that goes off when you finish one of the steps. I typically just use my phone and I don't really use this tab. But you can. It's up to you. Now I'm going to click on session. This is where you can input a lot of the data that you collect during your brew day. The most important things that I think that you should put in is your measured post-mash gravity, your measured pre-boil volume, your measured pre-boil gravity, your batch size, and your measured original gravity. Don't forget about your measured final gravity after you're already done fermenting, and your bottling volume. If you input all these numbers correctly, and you can see that they're yellow here, it'll give you a brewhouse efficiency at the end, as well as your measured efficiency. And heck, it even tells you your calories per 12 ounce. It's pretty neat. So as I'm going through, I might do my mash. It's suggesting that my post-mash gravity is supposed to be 1047. So I can go ahead and change that to 1047 if I hit my number. If you hit your number, great. There's even a button here to show a refractometer tool. This is a little bit more advanced if you're using a refractometer. But if you're using a hydrometer, you can just go ahead and put that number here. Then it's telling you should get about 4.91 gallons of pre-boil volume. Go ahead and look and see how much volume you have and enter it here. Then you can take a measured pre-boil gravity reading after you add, let's say you have to add some sugar after the mash, but before the boil. If you do something like that, this number will be different than this number, and you can take another reading and add it here. But in our case, these readings will actually be the same, assuming that we hit our numbers. Then you do your boil, and this is what goes into the fermenter. So you measure batch size. It's estimating we get about 3.75. And let's say we do that. We can take our final original gravity reading. It's suggesting 1062 is what we're predicted to get. So we can go ahead and type in 1062 if that's correct. Then you ferment your beer, and you take a final gravity reading. It's suggesting that you may get a 1018 specific gravity reading based on what you added for your ingredients. And let's say that was correct. Boom. Now if you look over here, your estimated ABV based on what you told BeerSmith is the same as your measured ABV. If your measured final gravity is a little bit lower, for example, let's say it was 1015, it'll tell you that your measured alcohol content is 6.2. So this whole page is basically telling you what BeerSmith thinks will happen, and then you put in what actually happened. And then it gives you percentages based on how well you did. You go from this side to this side to this side, and then back down here, and it'll tell you your final ABV. If you want to write notes during the process, you can click here and type in notes. Taste notes, notes just about the brewing process, whatever you want. And then this final tab here is the volumes tab. This will tell you the total volume of water that you need, give you a little bit of information about the weight of your grain, if you have different mash tun additions, and so forth. This is a very useful page. If you want to print out the brew steps, you can just click here where it says brew steps. And what do you know? You have your own recipe right here. It tells you all the information you need, and it even suggests that you hydrate your yeast, clean and prepare your brewing equipment, the amount of water you need, and your mash water acid if you're adding any. It also lists all of the water, the calcium chloride, your mash ingredients, and your different mash steps. So really, it gives you a nice little printout. And then you can hit print preview or print right here, and this will actually let you print it out. At the end of the day, you can change any of these during your mash if you decide to add something later or not add something. Maybe you decide that I'm going to throw in some extra hops. Go ahead and hit add hops and add some more hops. Everything will change as you change the design. Again, the design tab is kind of, the main tab that you want to focus on. And all these other tabs will change with this. Again, that's how you use the BeerSmith 3 program to design a recipe for your brew day. I hope this was helpful. Have a great day.